Sup, guys? It's Sode back with you for Friday, March 14th. One of the craziest days of the year, really. The Friday of college championship week, because you get the semifinals of a lot of the big conferences starting. Some of them still in the quarterfinals, of course, because a few of the big conferences go right into Sunday to the last moment. Yesterday I was 2-4, and I'm not happy about it. And to be honest, I think it should have been better than that at the very least. And I don't even really think I mishandicapped really any of those games. I mean, it was just, this is the way it fell, man. I mean, Indiana, they were winning the game, I think, at halftime, winning early on. They were still within 2 points with several minutes left, and they just went completely silent, and they wound up losing by double digits. But they were in that game until that final stretch where they just completely fell flat. It's kind of like, maybe I should start playing first halves. I'm not a first half player, but it's like a lot of these games I have right in the first half, and then they lose late, like that Arkansas game the other day. It all just pisses me off, man. And then Iowa State, I believe I had that one right throughout the first half and into the second half. Iowa State was winning the game most of the game, really. They had the lead, and then all of a sudden BYU turned it on again, just shocking everybody again. I don't know how they keep doing this. Maybe it's because that one dude that they have, his grandfather invented tater tots or whatever, so they are now the anointed team because they gave us those crispy fried taters. I have no idea. I don't even know if it's true. One of the announcers just said it, and maybe he was just making it up. No idea. But that happened, and then one game that I was not right on for the first half was Ohio, but they turned it around in the second half. They had the lead through the final stretch of the game, and I'm thinking, all right, Ohio's going to get this done. Nope, Toledo hung around. I think they wound up sending it into overtime, and then I lost the game in overtime, which is usually where underdogs go to die. But in my case, it was my small favorite that went to die. Again, just unbelievable. So I lose those first three games. Then I did hit on Texas. I hit on them, baby, because they're so attractive to me. Texas had the lead the whole game, and then it looked like they were going to blow it again, too, in Texas fashion, just like they did. I think it was Texas against Arkansas. Is that what it was when they blew the game and wound up not even covering in overtime? I think it was against Arkansas. I don't remember. Texas, yeah, the game goes into overtime, and I'm thinking they're going to lose this game, man, because underdogs go to overtime to die. That's what happens. But luckily, it's a Texas A&M team that doesn't really have a lot of scoring prowess. They mostly play defense, but it looked like I was going to lose the game. Texas A&M, I think, was up 4 with about a minute to go in the first overtime, and I think Texas tied it, sent it into double overtime, and then finally won the game in double OT. They got the outright win, baby. So Texas, I will talk about them in a minute because they're playing again today, but they got the job done for me. Outright money dog win. The St. Louis Blues, I don't know what to tell you, man. They were back within one goal, I think, in the third period in that game after they were down multiple goals throughout that game. But if you look at the stat sheet, it was all, I'm pretty sure it was Binnington in net, and it was all him. He sucked last night because St. Louis had a huge shot edge in the game, although you could argue some of it was because they were just firing shots because they were behind, which, yeah, that's true, but still, they had a huge shot edge. And when you have a team with a huge shot edge like that, you usually don't see them lose the game by multiple goals. It was just ridiculous. And the last goal in that one was an empty net, so it was a one-goal game coming down the wire there. But St. Louis couldn't get it done for me. And, yeah, I did play them as a road favorite, but so maybe I deserved to lose it. But I think the handicap was still right. The spot was still right. You got to try to analyze these, man. If you're dead wrong, you got to point that out. But if you're not dead wrong, and I don't like to admit that I'm wrong. I will when I'm wrong. I don't think that I was really mishandicapping any of these games, like I said. And then I did get the Chicago Bulls right, and they looked like they were going to be a loser too, as they were down in the third quarter. They were down, I think, double digits or almost double digits. But they came back and won and covered, so yay for me. And I have a similar NBA play today. Let's talk about today. I only have 3 plays today, man. We got a lot of selectivity. There are some spots that I like a little bit, and I'll point those out, and the market seems to have moved against some of those, so you are getting more value if you like those sides. You got to try to gauge this, man, because I always say with these conference tournaments, teams that are coming into the tournament cold have to go through like a little bit of an adjustment period, so those teams could be a little bit worse off in the game, or at least early in the game. And teams that already have like a game under their belt and out of the way are already adjusted to it. So they have a little bit of an edge. And then you want to look for teams that maybe barely escaped as a big favorite in their previous game and got that game out of the way. That's kind of the sweet spot. And I do have one play where I think that is the situation here. That is the spot. But let's look at what we got going on here. We got the Atlantic 10 entering the quarterfinals here. They don't. Their conference doesn't end until Sunday. They're one of the last ones to finish. This is in Washington, D.C. St. Bonaventure and VCU. And St. Bonaventure, a couple of advantages to them is that they played yesterday and they didn't really play well. They were losing to Duquesne all game as a favorite. St. Bonaventure was a favorite. I mentioned I liked Duquesne in that game. Duquesne probably should have had that game, man. Bonaventure put on like a late run where Duquesne fell completely flat, and Bonaventure, I think, sent it into overtime and scored the last 13 of the last 14 points in the game or something like that after Duquesne was up 7 in the final couple minutes of the game. Crazy. Bonaventure was not a huge favorite, as I pointed out yesterday. I thought it looked too easy to take Bonaventure. I think they're a little bit overrated. They are coming off of an escape now, though, and they are playing in a tournament where they did play yesterday, but I think the problem is that even though VCU hasn't played yet in this tournament, VCU is the best team in this conference, man, and I don't think that I think they're just going to be too much for Bonaventure. I think there's too much of a gap between these two teams. Whether or not VCU covers, that's up in the air. I don't expect VCU to lose this game. They're up from 10 to 11 as a big favorite, so we will see. Thank you, Will. Thanks for showing up, man. As usual. So we'll see. St. Louis, I think, is a team you might want to start actually looking towards because they won yesterday. They had a game yesterday, got a game under their belt, and they beat, who did they beat yesterday? They beat a team that's not as good as they are, a Davidson, which Davidson's actually not that bad. Davidson was probably the best of all the weakest teams that played yesterday. Maybe Duquesne. Duquesne definitely is an underrated team, but St. Louis was able to get the job done. They were able to win the game against Davidson. So now they have a game out of the way, but it looks like the money's coming in on Loyola Chicago up from Pick'em to 2. So some money coming in there, even though I would tend to have a slight lean towards St. Louis in this game. And if you do agree with that, you are getting more value. I just think the play really kind of hinges on the fact that they're already acclimated to the venue and already got a game out of the way. George Washington also did. The matchup of the Georges here, I actually think both of these teams are overrated. Both teams have good-looking records, and I think neither of them are quite as good as they look. George Mason, of course, is the team that the bracketologists were putting in their bracketology as the A10 winner for so long, and I was just hammering time and time again. I was like, VCU is better than George Mason, and I think, yeah, we're seeing that I'm right, although who knows what's going to happen in this tournament. George Mason is up from 2 to 3 here. George Washington got a game out of the way yesterday. They won. Who did they beat? I don't even remember who they beat. They beat some inferior team, got the job done there, and move on. So they're acclimated to the venue as well, so they have a little bit of an edge for that reason. And because I think George Mason's a little bit overrated, I might have a slight lean to George Washington, even though the line, again, is moving up on George Mason. Some of these early lines, you can't really read into them as like, oh, this must be the sharp side, because sometimes it's just numbers guys just wanting to get out ahead of the number, and they don't actually love that side that much. Sometimes it's a setup, and guys are going to come back in the other way if they get a better number. It's really hard to gauge. You never really know. You kind of need to be like on the inside of these sports books to see who is actually betting these games. That's why I kind of just try to rely on my situational analysis here. So we will see. But again, I think both of those teams are overrated. The strongest lean that I would have in the A10 would be to the St. Joe's side, but again, we see money coming in against that. Dayton up from a pick'em to a 2-point favorite. Dayton also entering this tournament for the first time as we get the top 4 seeds finally entering the tournament in the quarterfinal round. So it's a tough tournament structure, man, because those teams are still going to have to win 3 straight games, which I think kind of sucks because I think VCU deserves to get into the tournament. I mean, KenPom has them as like the 30th power-rated team. I mean, they could potentially have an at-large case, but I don't think it's going to happen because their schedule's not strong enough. So, I mean, that would suck. So they got to win, man. But anyway, St. Joe's, they played yesterday against LaSalle, and LaSalle usually steps it up against St. Joe's because they're the in-state, in-city rival. Both of those schools are in Philadelphia. So St. Joe's wound up only winning by 5 as like a double-digit favorite. So they're coming off an escape, although if you dig into that game a little bit, I don't think they're really in serious danger. They did have like a double-digit lead down the stretch, and it was kind of cosmetic. LaSalle kind of got in a bunch of like garbage time points basically to make the score look closer than it was. Still, you could maybe argue it was a close call. St. Joe's didn't cover as a big favorite. Now they're moving on to this game. They got a game under their belt already, and it wasn't the greatest game for them. I think they didn't shoot very well in that game either. I'd have to go back and look, but that's another factor here. Dayton is the better team, which I think is also factoring into why this number's moved like this, but with St. Joe's being a pretty decent team and having the edge of they already played in this tournament and it wasn't a great game for them, so now they can kind of adjust and they're already acclimated to the venue. Slightly into St. Joe's there. Big Ten continues with the top 4 seeds entering. Oregon beat me yesterday with that late burst against Indiana to get the win. Michigan State enters the fray, and they're up from 4.5 to 6.5, though. Michigan State's definitely the better team, and again, Oregon does have that game out of the way already, so they're acclimated to it. Oregon, obviously, they're not used to playing in the Big Ten tournament, but now that they have a game out of the way, they're a bit more adapted to it, and now they're there in the venue, so... but Michigan State, I mean, the money does look like it is coming in on them. That's a pretty substantial line move there. They're definitely the better team. I think Oregon's a bit overrated. I think them being ranked is causing them to be a bit overrated as well. They're not really a top 25 team. Probably would slightly agree with the line moving that one to Michigan State, but that's not a play for me either. Wisconsin played yesterday, and they only won by 7 against Northwestern, but I do think Northwestern hit a 3 right at the buzzer because it was a 10-point game. And Wisconsin, after not a great start to the game, which maybe was expected because I think Northwestern played the night before that, so Northwestern was the team that went into yesterday's game with like a game under their belt already. Wisconsin came in cold, but once Wisconsin got going, they turned the game around. They were able to get it done, and they had a big lead really in the second half, so the final score actually is maybe a little bit misleading. Wisconsin won more easily than the final score would indicate, in my opinion. Wisconsin, though, they're down from 2 to 1.5 in this game, even though they have a game out of the way already under their belt, and UCLA is coming in to play in the Big Ten tournament for the first time, man, as a first-time member of the Big Ten. I mean, I know I got Oregon wrong yesterday, but I still think it's a little bit of an extra disadvantage because they're not familiar with this travel. They're not familiar with this venue. Of course, they've had enough time off to get out there and get the travel out of the way. So they've probably been there in Indianapolis for a while now. The Big Ten tournament's all in Indianapolis. I think I disagree with this line move, though. I would probably slightly lean to Wisconsin, even though what you're getting here is UCLA probably is the better defense and the slowdown team, and that does kind of translate better to these tournament environments. But again, Wisconsin with the game yesterday where they didn't really play their greatest, and they got that game out of the way. They're more adjusted to it. So I don't really agree with the line move on UCLA there. Illinois and Maryland. Maryland up from a pick 'em to a 1-point favorite with juice. Maryland has not played yet in this tournament. Illinois played yesterday. I believe they got a pretty easy win over Iowa. Who, again, I told you yesterday, Iowa, they're basically just Illinois light, basically. Like, both teams play fast and like to score. Illinois is way better defensively, though, than Iowa is. Iowa's just not good. So Illinois was able to take care of business there, get the job done. They won. Now they're acclimated to the venue because they have a game out of the way. I might slightly lean to Illinois here, man, because Maryland's coming in here cold. Maryland, yeah, they're a good team, but they're a pretty young team, so Illinois has more of the pedigree here. I believe Illinois won the Big Ten tournament last year, too, so they do try to win. I know that didn't work out for me with Iowa State yesterday, but still, these teams have coaches that like want to win the tournament. So that is the case with Brad Underwood there. In Illinois, you know, they're more used to making deep runs in this thing. So I would probably lean that way, even though I think with Maryland, you're getting the better defensive team, though. So that's one issue. I do tend to look for defense a lot of the times, but maybe not in this case. Illinois, I still think people are kind of undervaluing Illinois. Maryland kind of has a hype train around them. Everybody kind of loving Maryland right now and loving their freshman there, Queen or whatever his name is. But again, Illinois, they do have the pedigree. They do have experience on that Illinois team. So I think they're maybe being a little bit undervalued. And then Purdue and Michigan, this is actually one of my plays, and it is laying the points with Purdue, -2.5. I actually think this is a little bit of a cheap line. Ken Pom has Purdue as the better team, of course, 16th in the country. He has them better than Michigan by only 13 ranking spots, but he does have them winning this game by 3, and I think there are multiple things at play here. Michigan is 60th in luck, according to Ken Pom. Purdue is 211th. So Ken Pom is telling you Purdue is better than they look, better than their record looks, and Michigan is worse. Michigan actually has a better record than Purdue because Purdue had that lull during the season, but I think both of these teams are actually kind of being shit on, so I've kind of been looking for spots to play Michigan. Because I guess the one caveat here is that Michigan did end the season badly. They lost 3 games in a row to end the season. So sometimes that time off coming into the conference tournament actually helps the team when they end the season badly. And I've been saying Michigan is actually battle tested because they play all these close games, but they seem to be falling apart a little bit, man. I mean, they are still a team. Some of these guys playing under a new system with Dusty May there. They're still a team that maybe going through some growing pains because they have a new coach there. He brought over Golden. They came over from Florida Atlantic. Other guys have to adjust to it. They still have to, they still have to go through that adjustment period, even though they've played the entire season now. But still, there are those factors at play, even though I've been looking for spots to maybe play Michigan because everybody's saying how overrated they are. But Ken Pom doesn't lie. He's telling you they're overrated. With Purdue, I know we're getting not the better defense here. Michigan is actually the better defensive team, according to Ken Pom. Purdue is the way better offensive team. Purdue is the underrated team. And then the other thing here is that Michigan likes to play fast, and Purdue likes to play slow. And I think Purdue being the better team, this being a tournament environment, I think they're going to win out in the pacing battle. It's going to be a slower game. That should be an advantage to Purdue as well. Throw Michigan out of their style. The other reasons I like this, well, the line is up from 2.5 to 3, by the way, so money coming in on Purdue. Again, I agree with that. And Purdue, they're a team that not only has a game out of the way yesterday, they played in this tournament yesterday, but they were playing a team that had won the night before, although it was in overtime. It was USC. So USC, they were new to the conference tournament, to the Big Ten tournament. They won their first game, too, against Rutgers. I'm pretty sure that was an overtime game. So you're getting a USC team that might be a little bit tired, so maybe they tired out by the end of that Purdue game, but Purdue did not have the greatest game in that game, man. I mean, we can go look. I don't know if I want to waste the time to do it. I want to get through these games, man. Purdue, they didn't play well. They were like a 10.5 point favorite in the game, barely escaped, and that was actually a close game. USC basically took Purdue almost to the wire in that game. So you got Purdue, who has a game out of the way, under their belt in the tournament, to get those nerves out of the way, get adjusted to it, and it was a bad performance from them where they were a big favorite, and they suffered a close call. So now you're getting the better team who should be extra focused because they didn't play well in the previous game and almost lost as a big favorite up against a team that has not played for a while, and they're coming into this tournament cold. Yeah, I like Purdue here. And this is also revenge, technically, for Purdue as well. Purdue, by the way, ranked 20th, Michigan 22nd. I don't know if that really matters. But Purdue, they lost to Michigan, I believe, the last time they played. Yeah, at Michigan, Purdue lost by 2 points. I think I won on that game. I think I had Michigan money line in that game. I think I won on that one because that was revenge for Michigan. Purdue absolutely embarrassed Michigan the game before that at home. And the thing about these two games is that while this game was a bit misleading, Purdue really shot well in this game. Michigan shot pretty poorly in this game. Michigan had a really, really horrible turnover margin in this game and actually won the rebound battle. But still, Purdue, I mean, they won this game pretty easily, even though maybe it wasn't really a 30-point win or whatever. They won the game easily. It was an embarrassing game for Michigan, so Michigan had a lot of incentive to get this game in the second game. Michigan, though, they were losing this game almost the entire game, too. So Purdue basically has played 2 entire games with a lead against Michigan, pretty much. So I think that tells you that Purdue is really the better of these two teams, which the odds makers are telling you that as well. But Purdue has basically held the lead for almost the entirety of 2 games against Michigan. They had the lead in this game for almost the entire thing, except for like a brief lull here where it was tied late in the game here. Purdue led for almost like 35 minutes in this game, basically. And then Michigan did take the lead one more time towards the end, and that's when they won the game. And again, these numbers are not really as misleading. Pretty close statistically in this game. So I don't think there's really that much misleading about it. I think from all that, I think Purdue is the better team, and they're in the better spot here. So I will play Purdue minus the 2.5 in that game. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to say about that, but Rooster, what's up? How much are we putting on them? I put the same amount on every game. I bet 330 to win 300, essentially, because you're laying the minus 110 VIG, so that's my size. But you want to make sure that you bankroll, man. Don't bet more than you can afford. Whatever you have in your bankroll, I recommend that you use 1% of it as kind of that unit size. So, like, my unit size, I guess you could argue, is 100 and not 300, but still, that is the way that you want to, like, do it. You don't want to don't blow your wad on any one game, man, because there's no such thing as a lock. Any game can lose. It's a grind. You're trying to just beat the percentages over time so that you win over time. Yeah, I obviously disagree with that. Michigan hasn't really been able to blow anybody out. Purdue blew out Michigan in the first game and had a double-digit lead in the second game. And Michigan, their only lead this entire season against Purdue was basically right at the end of that one game that they won. So I don't see that being the case. Nate, what's up, man? Bambino, I wish. Babe Ruth. I did mention my Italian family name in a comment on YouTube over on the Wager Talk channel yesterday. Yeah, don't goon your gambling wad, man. You want to really you gotta slowly do it, man. Over time, it's a numbers game, man. You want to watch like a whole ton of porn, basically, man. Basically, it's edging. That's what it is. That's what we're talking about. We're betting edging here. I got to get through these games, man. Conference USA, we're in the semifinals here with Liberty, who I said is the best team in this conference. They're still alive, up from 5.5 to 7.5. All of these teams played yesterday, by the way, I believe. Kennesaw State is their opponent here, and Liberty lost at home to Kennesaw State the last time they played, and I was on Kennesaw State in that game. Liberty was a 9.5 point home favorite. Oh, and by the way, Purdue, I believe they were like a 5.5 point home favorite, and Michigan was like a 2.5 point road favorite, or home favorite, excuse me, in those respective games. So I think 2.5, 3 is about a correct number in that game, just to point that out. Although I'm still playing the game because I think the situation puts it over the top. Kennesaw, as I was saying, won at Liberty the last time they played. This is a neutral site game now in Huntsville, Alabama, for the Conference USA, but still Kennesaw. This is actually weird because I think Kennesaw and Liberty were both in the Atlantic Sun before, and now they're both back in the same conference again in Conference USA. So a little bit interesting there, but Liberty's going to have a little bit of an extra advantage, I think, in this game because, or maybe a little bit of extra motivation, but also they'll be able to, like, fix what went wrong in that other game. But really what went wrong is it was a bad spot for Liberty. They didn't need to win that game. It was a sandwich spot. Kennesaw was able to pull off the upset at Liberty. I don't think it's going to happen again. I would lean to Liberty in this game, although you're starting to get up there in points. Obviously, with college basketball, 7 being the 3-possession threshold, I think you'd rather lay 7 or less there. But we will see. Middle Tennessee State went into, I believe, double overtime to get the job done against La Tech last night. I mentioned I kind of like La Tech in that game. I thought they had a matchup edge against Middle Tennessee. La Tech actually made a big comeback late in regulation in that game, I think. Send it into overtime. It went to double OT. So now Middle Tennessee's coming off double OT. Jacksonville State is the, I believe, the 2 seed in this tournament. They might be the 1 seed against Liberty. I forget. Those are the 1 and 2, though. Jacksonville State has flipped from a 1.5 point dog to a 1 point favorite with juice, so some money has flipped them to the favorite. A lot of it probably has to do with the rest edge here. So Jacksonville State, they do have the rest edge as Middle Tennessee played that double OT game last night. Both teams played yesterday, I believe, and Jacksonville State had a much easier game, so they do have an advantage for that reason. So I don't really disagree with that. I think the rest does kind of put that over the top, even though if you do look at these two teams, you might want to have a tendency to take Jacksonville State just because they're the higher seed, and you're basically going to pick the winner situation. But in this case, I think you might have that one right. I think Jacksonville State might be the right side. American Athletic continues with the quarterfinals where the top 4 seeds are all entering play here. Memphis, down from 10 to 9. They're, of course, the 1 seed. They should win this tournament, but this is such a cluster, man. I would not be shocked if they lose at some point in this tournament. Memphis is a turnover machine. They turn the ball over way too much. But in this game against Wichita, even though Wichita does have the edge of having played yesterday, I don't really buy it. I don't really buy this line move down from 10 to 9 here because Memphis, I believe, the last time they played Wichita, lost to Wichita, which I think was at Wichita. So similar with Liberty there. I think Memphis is going to have a little bit of an extra edge here in that they'll be able to adjust based on what happened in that game. They are coming into this game rested, and they are the better team, even though Wichita does have a game out of the way in this tournament. And all these games are at Fort Worth, Texas, by the way, which might benefit North Texas a little bit. Anyway, I would probably not want to fade Memphis in this particular game just because I think they have the readjustment edge there plus the rest edge, even though Wichita does have the acclimation edge, having acclimated to this tournament already. Florida Atlantic, this is an interesting one because they're actually a 3.5-point favorite against Tulane. So even though Tulane is one of the higher seeds, Florida Atlantic is actually the better team according to the odds makers, and I don't disagree with that. So I would kind of lean to Florida Atlantic because they're actually the better team, and they have the advantage of having played in this tournament yesterday, and I think they didn't do that well. I think they were a favorite, and they kind of just skated by. So Florida Atlantic is probably the way I would look in that game, even though they do have the name behind them. Everybody remembers their Final Four run a couple years ago. Of course, those guys are basically all gone. Like Janelle Davis is on, where is he now? I think he's on Arkansas now. And then Golden, as I mentioned, Vlad Golden is on Michigan now. So take from all that what you will, but I do like Florida Atlantic for the reasons I just said. Tulsa and North Texas. Tulsa pulled off an upset yesterday, a mild upset against Temple. I mentioned I liked Tulsa in that game. North Texas is a good team, though. They're up from 12 to 13 with juice. They're playing not that far from home because they're in Denton, Texas. That's not that far away from Fort Worth. So North Texas is probably going to have a bit of a crowd edge here as well. So, yeah, I mean, I would not really want to fade North Texas because they are definitely the better team, even though they have not played yet in this tournament. Tulsa already has. North Texas plays a slow-down style, though, really ugly style. So that might benefit them because that's more beneficial to you when you have that time off. It's easier to jump into a game kind of cold and just slow the game down. That's way easier to do. But the problem with slowing the game down is that North Texas scores so little that covering a huge line like this is kind of an issue. Total down from 126 to 125. So odds makers not thinking this is going to be at all a high-scoring game. They think it's going to be very low-scoring. So makes it a little bit difficult to cover a number like that. And East Carolina, I guess they won yesterday. I don't even know who their opponent was. UTSA maybe? I don't even remember. UAB up from 4.5 to 5 here. UAB is the better team here, even though they are coming into this tournament cold with East Carolina having a game under their belt. UAB is the better team, so I kind of expect them to get that done. We got Ole Miss going to the SEC in Nashville, Tennessee. Ole Miss and Auburn. Ole Miss, they won a really, really dramatic game yesterday, man, where it looked like Arkansas was going to advance and pull off the upset. Ole Miss was winning early in the game. Arkansas turned it around later in the game and took the lead late. The game went right down to the wire after that, and Ole Miss won on essentially a buzzer beater 3. Very, very dramatic win. So they had that game yesterday. They're coming off a real dramatic win, but they do have a game out of the way now under their belt, and Auburn is coming into this having not played yet in the tournament. But Auburn is still obviously the significantly better team, and they're a double-digit favorite here, up from 10 to 11.5. Money looks like it is coming in on the Auburn side. Ole Miss might be a little bit tired after that previous performance, even though they are used to the venue now. Auburn is just too good to me, and I just really probably wouldn't want to fade them, even though Ole Miss, I think, is better than people think that they are. But, I mean, it's Auburn, man. I would not want to really fade Auburn here. Texas is an interesting one, man. I've played on them in both games so far in this tournament. Those games are the ones that have made me look good, as they've won both games as an underdog. Tennessee up from 9.5, reduced juice to 9.5. Tennessee coming into this game not having played yet in the tournament, but they're a slow-down team, so it might be a little bit more of an advantage to Tennessee in that regard. They're playing in Nashville, so they're probably going to draw a lot of a crowd here, even though Texas's crowd travels, but Tennessee probably going to get a lot of fans there for this. Tennessee is fighting to try to get a 1 seed, man, so they do have a reason to show up here. Auburn, by the way, they lost their last 2 games of the regular season, so I think having that time off will actually advantage Auburn as well. Texas, they might be tiring out, man. So I don't really want to come in and try to play Texas for a third straight game, but Texas does still need to play. They still have reason to play as well because they're probably not secure, man. I have them as like the last team pretty much getting into the tournament, the last team into the last four in the first four in Dayton. So they still really have work to do if they want to really be secure. They're definitely not secure right now, even though I think that win over Texas A&M is going to probably be what gets them in. But I mean, if they beat Tennessee, they're almost definitely going to get in. I think they know that. So you're going to get a motivated effort from Texas as well. Texas at least does have they have acclimated to the venue, but they are playing a third game now in a row, so they are definitely at a rest disadvantage. Tennessee, though, the way that they play, just such a slow style, and their offense isn't really very good. Their defense is very good. Could be a low-scoring game, and that makes it more difficult to cover a big number like that. Missouri and Florida. Missouri played yesterday and got the win against, who did they play yesterday? I don't even remember. I leaned against them, and I wasn't right. It was against Mississippi State. Is that right? I wish I remembered, man. I think it was Mississippi State. Florida coming into this game having not played yet in the tournament, up from 7.5 to 8.5 with juice. Probably agree with Florida on this one. I mean, Florida, both of these teams are going to try to play fast, so I do like the over in this one too. And Missouri might be a little bit more tired after yesterday's game too, but I expect points here. Totals up from a 160.5 to 161.5. Both these teams like to run and score, and both teams have some issues. Well, I wouldn't say issues defensively, but they both like to run and score, man. Actually, both teams are not really that bad defensively. Florida actually quite good on both sides of the ball, surprisingly good defensively, which you wouldn't think that really because it's all about kind of them scoring a lot for Florida. But so the Florida's defense kind of gives me a little bit of a worry here. And plus, when I don't love overs, by the way, when a team is playing their first game in a venue, which I'll talk about when I talk about the tournament too, but the first game in a particular venue, you have to get used to that venue. And like if you shoot a lot of threes and whatever, you got to get used to the sight lines or whatever. So your shooting might be off early in the game. So it does make sense to look to like unders, especially in the first half of games where both teams are in that situation and coming into that game not having played yet in the tournament. But that just might kind of affect if you want to play the over here because Florida hasn't played yet in this venue. But Florida, just like Tennessee, and Alabama, they're all kind of vying for that last one seed right now, so they're not going to want to exit this tournament. So they are all going to show up. Alabama's up from 4.5 with juice to 7 now. Kentucky had a dramatic win last night too, although they were a favorite and they barely escaped with a buzzer beater against Oklahoma, who Oklahoma trying pretty hard to get into the tournament here, and maybe they will after that recent run that they made. I do have them as one of the last teams in right now as well. Kentucky, they're acclimated to the venue now, but they might be getting a little bit tired. I like the over in this one, man. This total is unbelievably high, but it's unbelievably high for a reason. Even though Alabama's had some time off, I don't disagree with the Alabama side here either, even though Kentucky does have that game out of the way, and Alabama has not played yet in this tournament. Alabama, I mean, they are the better of these two teams, although Kentucky, they played Alabama fairly competitively in both games, though, so we'll see. But Kentucky, they have been dealing with some injury concerns. They're a little bit thinner. Played a really dramatic game last night, so I don't really want to be on Kentucky after that. The over makes sense to me, though, because these are two teams that really, they have some defensive issues. They're really good offensively, and they both play really fast. So the over makes sense here. I mean, the total is that high for a reason. I think both games they played during the regular season went over. Usually tournament games are lower scoring because you usually get defense, so you want to look towards unders more often than not in tournament games, but not in a Kentucky-Alabama game, man. In the MAC, Akron is, of course, the best team in the MAC. They won yesterday. All these teams played yesterday, so there's no, having to get adjusted to this venue anymore. We're in the semifinals here. Akron up from 8.5 down from 8.5 to 8 with juice, so some money coming in on Toledo. I don't really see it, man. I mean, I mentioned it yesterday. Toledo, yeah, they could score. They play fast, but their defense is just really, really inferior. I mean, I think Akron probably gets it done. Toledo also had to play into overtime yesterday and beat me. Got that big win over Ohio. I think Akron had a much, much easier win, although it makes Akron look good because they won in like a massive blowout. But that does mean that they had to put in almost no effort to get that win. So I don't really agree with that move. I think probably the lean would be towards the Akron side. Kent State, even though they're the lower seed behind Miami, Ohio, Kent State, I believe they're the lower seed, but they are the better team. They're up from 3.5 to 3.5 with juice. I agree with that. I've been talking about, I think Miami, Ohio is a little bit overrated. I don't think they're as good as their record indicates. And Kent State has really turned it on in the later part of the season, and they're doing it with defense and slowing the game down. So they're a better defensive team. They're a team that's a style that I like to look for in the tournament. And I think it just kind of makes sense that this tournament is going to come down to Akron and Kent State. If the gods have anything to say about it, which a lot of times they do not, but those are the two best teams in the MAC, in my opinion. Now we have from the MAC to the MAC. The MAC is in Cleveland, by the way, neutral site. All these are neutral sites. The MAC is in Atlantic City. We're down to 4 teams here in the semifinals. Iona, I've been telling you they're one of the better teams in this conference, and they won yesterday. They're still alive. They're up against Quinnipiac, who I believe is the 1 seed, who's up from 3.5 to 4. All these teams played yesterday, so there's no getting adjusted to this environment here either. Quinnipiac, they are the better team. The money's coming in on them, although Iona, I mean, I think there might be some value on Iona just because their record doesn't look anywhere near as good as Quinnipiac, and they're not really that much worse. So there might be some value looking towards Iona there, man. And Iona, they're always a difficult out in this MAC tournament, man. They have a good pedigree, good history, even though they don't have Rick Pitino there anymore, but still. And then Mount St. Mary's against Merrimack. Mount St. Mary's pulled off a big win yesterday over Marist. Makes them look pretty good. So I think Mount St. Mary's is going to get like the if the public is looking at this game at all, I think they're going to give Mount St. Mary's the credit for getting that win over one of the top seeds over Marist, where they're not going to give Merrimack that much credit for barely beating Sacred Heart. So I kind of agree with the Merrimack side here. They are the better of these two teams, even though they are new to this conference. They're up from 4 to 6.5 with juice. Merrimack hasn't even been in D1 that long. And I believe they won the Northeast Conference one of those years, but they were ineligible. So it was one of those situations. But I agree with the line move here. I agree with Merrimack, but they're not really a team I want to start laying that many points with them. I think their defense does have some issues at times. This is a very low total as well. So it's expected to be a pretty low-scoring game. But I think Mount St. Mary's is going to get way more credit for their win yesterday. Like I said, and Merrimack kind of escaped against an inferior team. So I think Merrimack makes sense. In the Big East has actually come down to a semifinals with the 4 best teams in the conference all still alive. St. John's had an easy win yesterday over Butler. They're down from 5 to 4.5 here, though, against this Marquette team who barely got by Xavier in a dramatic game there. But Marquette had to play the tougher game. They had to play later in the day. So I think Marquette has a little bit of a rest disadvantage here, but they are going to want to try to beat St. John's, man. I mean, St. John's going to have a target on their back. The problem is, I just don't know that I could really come in and try to fade St. John's, man. I mean, they are still a good team, and they're playing in their home away from home, basically, or secondary home in Madison Square Garden. They have a lot of hype around them. You know the crowd is all going to be there for them. So it almost kind of makes sense you're going to get a St. John's UConn final in this tournament. We'll see if that happens. I mean, both teams are not huge favorites here, but we will see. Although Marquette, I mean, they've been playing not up to their level of talent recently. So I think they are a little bit undervalued. UConn is facing Creighton. UConn up from 3 to 3.5 with juice. Creighton actually had to really escape yesterday. They played the earlier of the 2 games, and they almost lost to DePaul. DePaul was beating them all game. Creighton was a double-digit favorite, so I actually like Creighton in this game because they didn't play well at all as a double-digit favorite there. UConn had to actually make a huge comeback, although then again, UConn was also a favorite, and they almost lost to Villanova. Villanova played them quite well, although UConn did have the game in hand by the end of it. They really completely turned the game around after they were losing in the first half. UConn, the money looks like it is coming in on UConn here. I don't agree with it as much, though. I mean, I would slightly lean to Creighton still because they had a real bad scare against a really inferior DePaul team. I just think DePaul having that game under their belt kind of helped them. Creighton hadn't played yet in this tournament. So there were some advantages earlier in that game to DePaul, and Creighton still was able to come back and get the win. So I think that is going to focus them. And, of course, this is UConn, man. UConn's always going to have a target on their back. All four of these teams are going to make the tournament, so it doesn't really matter as far as the tournament is concerned what happens in the remainder of this tournament. It'll matter for seeding, but that's about it. So really, it's just a matter of which teams want to win this conference tournament, pretty much. And UConn will have the bigger crowd there, though. UConn and St. John's will have the big crowds because those are the two teams that are nearby. ACC continues in Charlotte, North Carolina. And, of course, that is the correct venue, really, to host a game between North Carolina and Duke. North Carolina has gotten to the point that they wanted to in this tournament, and I think they may need to win this game to get into the NCAA tournament, man. They need that win against Duke. I don't know if they necessarily need to win this entire tournament, but I think beating Duke might do it for them, and it just got maybe a little bit more possible because Duke lost Cooper Flagg yesterday, and I believe they lost one of their other players too. So Flagg, I'm pretty sure, is not going to play in this game. He landed badly on his ankle. I think his ankle landed on somebody else's foot when he came down, and he sprained his ankle. Looks like a pretty bad injury. I don't think he's playing in this game. The line would indicate that he's not. Duke is down from 9 to 7.5. North Carolina really, really needs this game, so I don't want to fade North Carolina because otherwise I would say, oh, well, this is an injured player theory spot because you're actually getting more value with this Duke team now. And you know the first game without Flagg, they're going to step it up and really put in a big effort here, and that may be the case, so I wouldn't want to fade Duke because of that, because I think the line is a little bit short now on Duke, but North Carolina, they have the need, man. Duke is going to be a 1-7 if they lose this game, so it's not going to matter as much to them, and I think really for Duke, I think they may not even care actually as much about this game, and they may want to just try to get healthy at this point and get ready for the tournament and try to get Flagg healthy. North Carolina needs this game, so I do actually slightly lean to North Carolina after thinking about this more because my initial reaction was, oh, this is going to be an injured player theory spot, but I think the motivation is just stronger on the North Carolina side, so I would agree with that side. Not going to be a play for me, though. Clemson and Louisville, I mean, this is going to be a good game. Both of these games actually should be pretty good. Clemson has gone from a pick 'em to a 1-point favorite. I agree they're the better team over Louisville. Clemson is a balanced team, man. They are the better of these two teams. Louisville did escape yesterday as a pretty big double-digit favorite against Stanford. So they're one of those teams where they are coming off an escape. So that might motivate them a little bit. But both of these teams are going to want to win this game. And I think both of these teams, I think they both entered this tournament thinking we're going to get to the final and get to play Duke one more time, and that's what it's going to be, and I think that's what the people want as well, so we'll see what happens. I lean to Clemson a little bit. I just think they're the better overall team, the more balanced team there. They're a pretty good team, man, and of course, they're the one of these teams that actually beat Duke. I don't even think Louisville played Duke this year. It's just all very, very strange, and I think everybody kind of wants the Duke-Clemson rematch, really, although I kind of want North Carolina to get into the NCAA tournament because metrics-wise, they are actually good enough, even though the ACC has been way down. Ken Pom has them as like the 35th best team. So take from that what you will. And then in Kansas City, Missouri, the Big 12 semifinals are going on. And we have another injury as Houston lost Jawan Roberts, I think is his name. He's maybe not their best player, but he is their most experienced player. So this Houston team, a lot of experience, and Roberts, I believe, is the player on the team that has the most wins on the team in his Houston career. I think he's in his third year with Houston. So that is a big loss for Houston. I still kind of like Houston in this game, though. I mean, it does set up an injured player theory if Roberts isn't going to play, although Kelvin Sampson came out and said that he thinks Roberts might be able to play in this game, but I don't know. He also, I believe, sprained his ankle yesterday. It seems like it's less serious than Flagg's injury, but I don't know. Maybe Sampson is downplaying it. We'll see. I think he'll probably not play in this game because Houston, again, just like Duke, you're probably going to be a 1 seed at this point. You got to gear up for the actual tournament. But then again, I did say I like Houston in this game, so I don't know. What am I saying? There are reasons to think both ways about this, man. BYU, I just think their run has to end at some point, man. And I think if it's going to end, it's got to end against a team that's significantly better than they are, which Houston is. BYU pulled off another win yesterday. They beat me. They were losing all game against Iowa State, and they came back and won that game. I mean, really. And now Houston, if Roberts isn't going to play in this game, I mean, Houston still might want to just win this game. I mean, the line is moving on them a little bit, and if Roberts isn't in there, it'll be an injured player theory spot where the team will step up that first game without him. And I think at this point, nobody's overlooking this BYU team at this point. Houston, they're also a style that BYU does not want to run into, man. Iowa State plays fast, so that's good for BYU because BYU, I believe, also likes to play fast. Houston is the complete opposite. So now BYU is running into a team that likes to slow the pace way down. And by the way, Houston, they won easily yesterday against Colorado, but I think Houston just took their foot off the gas. They only won by 9 points as a 17.5-point favorite. And Roberts got hurt. I just think Houston didn't really care about that game by the end of it. They knew they were going to win the game anyway, so I think they just really kind of sleepwalked through that game. And Houston didn't have a game in the tournament yet under their belt. Colorado did have 2 already, so they were playing a 3rd game in a row. But that was what was going on in that game. Houston, yeah, I mean, they would still be the way I would lean in this game because they came off a final score that didn't look that great yesterday. Plus, it's the injured player theory spot. And Houston is less secure in a 1 seed than Duke is, by the way. So Duke, they're going to get a 1 seed even if they lose. Houston, maybe they wouldn't if they lost to BYU. Even the BYU is a ranked team now. So I think Houston does have the motivation here. And then Arizona beat Kansas late last night. I kind of liked the Kansas side there, but Kansas, they're just not that good, man. I mean, they have the talent, and they just keep falling short of that talent. Arizona's a good team. Texas Tech is a good team. So we have some good teams left in the Big 12, man. Texas Tech up from 2 to 2.5. I think people are going to think Arizona's win was more impressive, though, because they beat Kansas. They had the lead the whole game. It was a good-looking win for Arizona. It was a revenge win for Arizona, whereas Texas Tech, they had kind of a close game against Baylor. But remember, Baylor had already played once in this tournament, which was kind of my argument for Kansas yesterday. They'd played already in the tournament, and they had a close call. Baylor had already played a game in the tournament as well. So they had a little bit of an edge that way. Baylor is, of course, like the little brother right now against Texas Tech, the way things have been going in the state of Texas. Texas Tech was able to get it done, but Texas Tech is the better of these teams between them and Arizona, man. And they had the game that looked less impressive yesterday, so I like Texas Tech in this one. They're up from 2 to 2.5. That's the way I would lean there. Going to the WAC semifinals in Las Vegas at the Orleans. Utah Valley is the 2 seed here. All these teams played yesterday. All the teams were in play by the quarterfinals round. The top 2 teams are still here with Utah Valley and Grand Canyon. And actually, I really think we have the top 4 teams all still alive here in this tournament. Seattle is a very underrated team. Utah Valley State up from 2 to 2.5 here. But you look at these teams' records. Utah Valley's record looks so much better than Seattle's. It's ridiculous. So people are going to look at this and think, it looks like really, really tempting to play Utah Valley in a situation where it's basically just pick the winner, and I would not agree with that. I like Seattle in this one. I think the line looks way too easy to take Utah Valley, man. I've been telling you Seattle's underrated a lot of the year. They played a more difficult out-of-conference schedule than Utah Valley did. I believe Seattle plays a more slow-down style as well, so that's more conducive. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Let me make sure I'm right about that. Utah Valley... they play somewhat fast, and Seattle's only the slightly worse team here, down 17 ranking spots lower here. Yeah, Seattle plays slower, and Seattle is a top 100 defensive team, which Utah Valley also is, by the way. So defensive game, you might get more defense. Maybe taking the points makes more sense. And Seattle is pretty much the unluckiest team in the entire nation. 364 out of 364 teams, whereas Utah Valley 17th in luck. So Ken Baum is telling me Utah Valley is way overrated right now and that Seattle's way underrated. So I like Seattle there. And then Grand Canyon, they're the best team in this conference. We know they've won it the last couple of years. They're up from 7 to 8 here. They might not quite have an easy time of it this year versus what they did the last couple of years, but they're still a big favorite here against Cal Baptist. They won't take Cal Baptist lightly either because Cal Baptist did beat them once. during the season. I was actually on that game on Cal Baptist. It was at Cal Baptist, and we were getting a bunch of points in that game. Grand Canyon up from 7-8 with juice. I wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, Grand Canyon is the better team, and that's just the way that it is. Not really great handicap there. Now in Henderson, Nevada, we have the Big West entering the semifinals, and everybody wants to see UC San Diego and UC Irvine in the final, man. That would be a great matchup. We all want to see UC San Diego get into the tournament, man. And it's going to be interesting if they make the final and lose to Irvine. Will San Diego still be in the tournament? That is the question. Will they get in that large bid? As UC San Diego is way up there in the KenPom rankings in like the 30-something range. So they deserve to get in, man. But their out-of-conference schedule is just not strong. And, of course, their conference schedule is not strong, playing the Big West. But this UC San Diego team is really good, and they're actually really balanced. Whereas last year they were all offense and no defense. This year they actually play defense, too. They are really good. They're up from 9.5 to 11.5. Big line move on them against UC Santa Barbara. UC San Diego and UC Irvine. Did they both play yesterday? I don't even remember if they played yesterday or not. Did they? Let me see. I think they did not. So I think they enter this tournament into the semifinals as the way this tournament is structured. So, yeah, they have a slight disadvantage in that UC Santa Barbara and Cal Poly both have already played in this tournament. We'll talk about Cal Poly in a second. But UC San Diego and UC Irvine are such the better teams over these opponents here, man, that they should get the job done. Whether or not they cover, I don't know. But I think it'll be the end of the road. UC Santa Barbara had a nice win, I think, last night against who did they beat? I think they beat UC Davis, maybe. So decent win there. Cal Poly beat Riverside, actually pulled off an upset. We'll talk about Cal Poly in a second. But, yeah, I like UC San Diego in that game. And I also like UC Irvine in this game against Cal Poly, and that is the other play for me. My second of two plays. I'm going to lay it with UC Irvine. They're up from 8 to 10 with juice, 10.5. I never saw an 8 out there, though, so I don't know when it opened that. It's been 10, 10.5. KenPom has UC Irvine winning this game by 11. UC Irvine is the way better team, man. I mean, they're still one of the top teams in this conference. Cal Poly has pulled off multiple upsets to get here. I think the first game was about a pick-em. Last night they upset UC Riverside. It was a higher seed there. I think it's the end of the road for Cal Poly here, man. They're playing a third game now in 3 nights. So UC Irvine has the rest advantage here, even though, yeah, they're not used to playing in this venue yet. But they're such the better team, and I think maybe they'll get off to a slow start, but then after that, I think they're going to turn this thing on, man. UC Irvine is actually 16th in the country in defensive efficiency on KenPom. They're 66th overall, so that's good. Yeah, they're high in luck index, which worries me a little bit, 51, so they're overperforming a bit, but still. They also play fast, so Cal Poly also plays fast. Cal Poly third in the nation in tempo. Their defense is really awful, though. So UC Irvine has the much better defense. It's not even close. Both teams are similar offensively in offensive efficiency. Both teams can score. Both teams kind of overrated. KenPom has Cal Poly more mid-tier as far as the luck index is concerned. But Cal Poly, they play fast and they score. And now they're running into an Irvine team that also does the same thing, plays fast, and could score a bit. Although they're actually a better defensive team, even though they play fast. So Irvine is almost like a mini St. John's. So I think probably they profile as a team that like turns you over and whatever. But I think it's the end of the road for Cal Poly, man. UC Irvine is the way better team here. So that's what I expect. I think Irvine is going to get that one done. And then we do have the Mountain West. Got to try to finish this off here, man. Boise pulled off a big win over San Diego State yesterday, man. So that was like the big bubble matchup yesterday. So San Diego State, I have them as one of the last teams in the tournament right now. I have them in the first 4, but they're going to be sweating after that loss. I don't think it's going to dock them that much because Boise's good, but we will see. This is at the Thomas and Mack in Las Vegas, of course. Boise, that was a big win for them, but I don't think Boise is going to just be done here, man. I think Boise, I still have them out of the tournament, and I think they know they're going to potentially be in the tournament if they beat New Mexico. And this is definitely a winnable game for them. I lean to Boise in this one, even though they are coming off a big win. New Mexico had an easy win earlier in the day, I think against San Jose State. New Mexico up from 1 to 1.5 with juice, so the money coming in on New Mexico. I would lean the other way because Boise needs this game more. I mean, New Mexico, they're going to get into the tournament even if they get bounced here. Boise needs the game more, and Boise is the slowdown team, man. New Mexico plays way, way fast, and Boise slows the game down. A lot of times it's in a tournament environment like this, or in any game, really, unless you're like on the road, in a true road game, it tends to be easier to slow the game down. I think that's what you're going to get out of Boise. And then you got Utah State, Colorado State. I mean, these are both good matchups, man. Competitive matchups. Colorado State up from a pick 'em to a 1-point favorite. No, I don't want to make a pick on this game. What are you doing to me? I should have mentioned I liked Colorado State as far as like their future was concerned to win this conference tournament, but just a little bit of an aside, if you're going to play futures, I would actually do a rollover approach instead where you play that team on the money line in every individual game instead, because you actually win more money if you do it that way. You get better odds that way. You don't get great odds on the future bet. And if you do that and you don't like the next matchup, you can stop at any time if your team's still alive and just collect your winnings at that point. So the rollover, if that makes sense, is way better. In my opinion, is way better. Like you take your money, put it on the money line of the first game, and then whatever you win out of that, if you win, put all of that on the next game. You know what I mean? But you could stop at any point. So I would have done that with Colorado State. Out of any team in any of these conference tournaments, Colorado State, their path to me looked pretty decent, and they're one of those teams where they could potentially get into the tournament. I think they probably have to win this tournament to get into the tournament, but this is the next step. They won last night. Utah State actually played even later than they did last night, so Colorado State may be slightly more rested just because they played earlier. They won against Nevada. Wasn't a very difficult game for them. It was close down the stretch, but they had put it away for the most part. Utah State had a pretty easy win as well, I believe, over UNLV, knocking them out in basically their home arena. I agree with this line move here. I like Colorado State here, and the odds makers are telling you Colorado State is actually the better team now, which is crazy to think about. The odds makers are telling you they're actually the better team now. Colorado State also slows the game down, which is, again, better for a tournament environment like this. I don't like these fast-paced teams as much, and Utah State is one of those. But Utah State does have revenge because the last time they played at Colorado State actually completely embarrassed them and beat them by almost 30 points. So we'll see what happens there. We got the SWAC going on. Grambling actually took out Southern as a 5.5-point favorite in this conference. So Grambling actually pulled off the upset against the top team in the Southern Conference. Or not the Southern Conference, the SWAC, excuse me. They beat Southern University, who I think is in Louisiana. I thought they were in Texas for a long time. They're in Louisiana. So Grambling could be in a little bit of a letdown for that reason. Alabama State's the slightly better team. These games were all in Atlanta. Alabama State down from 3 to 2.5, though. But I kind of lean against Grambling just because they pulled off that upset against Southern, who's one of the best teams in this conference. And then Bethune-Cookman and Jackson State. All four of these remaining teams are not that bad, although Grambling is the worst of the remaining teams. These other three teams are amongst the top in the conference. Jackson State's that team I mentioned earlier in the year because they won 0 out of conference games, and now in conference they've won almost every conference game. So it's just such a dichotomy. It's crazy. The SWAC is just so low tier of a conference. And Jackson State had a really difficult out-of-conference schedule, but it made them battle-tested, man, and they've done really well in the conference this year. They're up from 2 to 3.5 with juice. I agree with that move. I think Jackson State's the better team over Bethune-Cookman. I think it makes sense. And then Norfolk State and South Carolina State are the top two teams in the MEAC, and they're both still playing here. Norfolk State up from 10.5 to 11.5, playing in Norfolk, Virginia, by the way. So it might actually be hosted by Norfolk State because they're the 1 seed. These games might all actually legitimately be in their arena, so that gives them a nice edge there. I mean, they're a double-digit favorite against Morgan State. I don't expect them to lose that. South Carolina State is also definitely better than NC Central, so I expect them to win as well. And that's going to do it for now. We'll see what happens, man. I'll be back and talk about NHL and NBA again, just like I usually do. We'll have an evening show again. I do have an NBA play on the Toronto Raptors plus 2.5, which is a situation that lines up for me. I'll talk about it tonight. College basketball, Purdue minus 2.5 in the afternoon, and UC-Irvine at night minus 10.5 are my only plays today, being a bit more selective here, but not as much that I like today. So that's going to do it for now. Tower Gang Toad on Twitter, patreon.com/Tower Gang for the most offensive comedy podcast in existence. And I'll be back in the evening and quickly go over NBA and NHL. Not a whole lot of games tonight, but we'll talk about it. Just too much college basketball, man. Only during March Madness. That's going to do it for now. Peace.